deep in the isolated hills of Hawkins County, where gravel roads twist through dense forests and silence stretches for miles. A single statement shattered the calm. For months, the disappearance of 5-year-old Summer Wells had seemed hopelessly stuck. Thousands of search hours, endless interviews, no arrests, no confirmed suspects, and no trace of the little girl whose smile once lit up these Tennessee mountains. But then, one man spoke, a neighbor, an ordinary resident of Ben Hill Road, a man the world barely noticed until he opened his mouth. His name was Fred Hill, and with just one remark, he shifted the direction of every online investigation, every theory, and every discussion surrounding the case. He pointed to someone, and the moment he did, the internet crowned that person the prime suspect. This is the story of that moment. Asterisk, before the interview that changed everything, Fred Hill was just another neighbor tucked into the rugged hills above Ben Hill Road. A man who had lived long enough in those mountains to know every echo, every trail, every sound that didn't belong. He had watched the helicopters circling overhead, their blades chopping through the humid Tennessee air as they hovered low over the treetops. He stood outside on his porch some nights, staring into the darkness as search teams pushed deeper into the hollows with flashlights that flickered like fireflies. From where he lived, he could hear the disjointed chorus of the search. Dogs barking frantically, ATVs grinding over loose gravel, volunteers shouting Summer's name into valleys that swallowed the sound whole. The entire community buzzed with fear, confusion, and rumors. But Fred kept to himself. He stayed quiet, listening more than he spoke, watching the chaos unfold around him like a wildfire. He couldn't stop. And then came a day no one expected. A quiet afternoon. A small YouTube live stream. Nothing dramatic. Just a casual conversation. An everyday moment where a local man agreed to share what he'd seen, what he'd heard, and what he thought. But the moment he started talking, people noticed. Fred wasn't stumbling through half-remembered details. He wasn't hesitating. He wasn't confused. He sounded clear, focused, measured, almost too measured. Then he slowed down, took a breath, and paused long enough for everyone watching to lean closer to their screens. The entire chat froze, waiting. And then he said a name, not with anger, not with theatrics, just a steady, deliberate suggestion, one person he believed deserved more attention. Someone whose actions, in his view, didn't fit the frantic chaos gripping the community. Someone he felt behaved off. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a rant. It was quiet, controlled, chilling in its precision. In that single moment, Fred Hill unintentionally fed the internet exactly what was hungry for: a direction, a theory, a spark. And with one name spoken calmly into a live stream microphone, the firestorm erupted. The instant Fred Hill revealed the name, everything shifted in a way nobody fully expected. People who had been half listening suddenly sat upright. Live stream commenters flooded the chat, so fast the screen couldn't keep up. And within minutes, viewers began clipping the moment and launching it across every platform they could reach. TikTok, Reddit, Facebook groups, Discord servers, and true crime YouTube communities already starving for the smallest hint of new information. By the time the live stream ended, that name wasn't just circulating. It was multiplying. Within hours, it was everywhere. But it wasn't just a name that caused the explosion. It was the reasoning behind it. Fred didn't whisper. He didn't dance around what he meant. After saying the name, he went straight into details. Things he claimed to have noticed on the day Summer disappeared. He talked about movements that didn't match the energy of the search. People appearing where they shouldn't have been. Behaviors that felt timed a little too perfectly. He mentioned timelines that seemed strangely convenient, as if someone knew when attention would be focused elsewhere. He described subtle observations. A suspicious glance exchanged when no one was supposed to be watching. A reaction too quick or too rehearsed. A decision made at exactly the wrong, or perhaps too perfect moment. Tiny pieces, individually meaningless. But to Fred, they suggested something wasn't right. And whether Fred was mistaken, misunderstood, or absolutely convinced he was onto something, the internet didn't care. To viewers, he sounded like a man finally voicing what others have been thinking, but were too afraid to say. Comments poured in. Fred just said what we've all been thinking. He knows something. He just told us who to watch. That wasn't a guess, that was confidence. It didn't matter that Fred wasn't law enforcement. It didn't matter that nothing he said was officially confirmed. It didn't matter that the person he named was not publicly listed as a suspect. What mattered to the internet was one thing. Fred Hill was local. He lived on that mountain. He was close enough to feel the search in his bones. And to thousands of true crime watchers, that alone was enough to make his words feel credible, whether they actually were or not. Once Fred Hill spoke that name, the online true crime world ignited like a powder keg. The response was immediate and relentless. Overnight, hundreds of creators, analysts, and amateur investigators began combing through every scrap of information related to the individual Fred had mentioned. Old interviews were pulled from archives and playlists. Every clip, every soundbite, every body movement was scrutinized under a microscope. Voice tones were dissected for stress or hesitation. Facial expressions and microexpressions were examined frame by frame, searching for even the slightest flicker of deceit or discomfort. Nothing was too small to consider, and every minor detail was debated, reinterpreted, and re-uploaded across platforms. Soon, social media posts flooded feeds with provocative titles designed to grab attention and provoke discussion. Is this the real suspect? Fred Hill points to the truth. Why wasn't this person investigated earlier? The work didn't stop at videos. Creators began building full timelines around the person in question, trying to reconstruct every movement, every conversation, every decision made on the days Summer disappeared. Maps were annotated, circles drawn around locations, and screenshots stitched together to form patterns. Heat maps were generated to show proximity and movement. Every digital tool at their disposal was used to build a narrative, a story, a theory that could rival professional investigations. It became a digital avalanche. Each new upload or comment fed the frenzy, fueling speculation and creating a self-reinforcing cycle of interest and obsession. Within days, the collective effort of social media had done what law enforcement had been careful not to do publicly. They had identified a prime suspect. Not officially, not in a court of law, not even in a police report, but loudly, powerfully, irrefutably, at least in the eyes of the internet. And in this environment, the question of guilt or innocence became secondary. What mattered most was attention, focus, scrutiny. The individual Fred had named was now under the harsh, relentless gaze of thousands of people, each click and share magnifying the impact. The digital fire had been set, and there was no turning it off. When the person Fred Hill pointed to finally realized that the internet had turned its full, unblinking attention on them, everything shifted. What had once been casual participation in interviews or community discussions suddenly became a spotlight they could not escape. The pressure was immediate and suffocating. Some viewers swore this individual grew more defensive during later interviews, answering with shorter sentences, tighter expressions, and a stiffness that hadn't been there before. Others claimed they dodged questions they previously answered freely. People noticed changes in tone, a strain in the voice, a hesitation between words, a suddenly guarded posture. Whether the shifts were real or imagined, the audience interpreted all of it as meaningful. Creators pounced on these moments. They stopped video second by second, froze frames, zoomed into eyes, jawlines, hand movements. They replayed short clips at 0.25 speed, listening for tremors in the voice that might signal fear, guilt, or panic. A stray blink, a twitch, a swallow. Everything became potential evidence. Nothing this individual said could escape scrutiny. Every laugh was questioned. Every pause was replayed. Every attempt to explain was met with comments claiming that's not right. They're hiding something, or look at that reaction, that's guilt. Online theories began pouring in faster than anyone could read them. Watch their eyes when they answer. They shift too fast. Listen to that pause after question. They're thinking of a lie. They didn't deny it strongly enough. Notice how they change the subject. For many viewers, these tiny details, whether real or imagined, solidified into certainty. They didn't just suspect this person, they believed they knew the truth. But for others, a nagging question grew louder. Was the internet uncovering truth, or was it creating its own villain? Still, one thing overshadowed everything else. Fred Hill had pointed to them. One name spoken calmly on a live stream was all it took. And for the online world, that alone was enough to crown him the unofficial prime suspect. No evidence required. And here's the part that changes everything. While social media crowned its prime suspect, official investigators did not. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation did not confirm Fred's claim. They did not release evidence supporting his suspicion, and they repeatedly warned against internet-driven theories. But none of that mattered. The online investigation had taken on a life of its own, fueled by emotion, frustration, and a desperate desire to find Summer Wells. Fred Hill's comment was treated like a spark, and the internet turned that spark into an inferno. True or not, proven or not, one thing became clear. Sometimes, in cases like this, it isn't law enforcement who decides who the world looks at. It's a single sentence, spoken by a neighbor, amplified by millions, and transformed into a theory none of us saw coming.